It's time for Lefties Losing It. Let's start in Minnesota, where the spin doctors have been busy fighting back after revelations of mass fraud and dysfunction in the Somali community, and they're putting their best and brightest to work in front of the media to explain what it means to be Somali in America.
So I'm Somali. I'm proud to be Somali. To me, being Somali isn't just eating bananas with rice. It's a lot. It's like it's an interesting thing. It's very hard to describe what it means to be Somali and what it means to be American.
Okay, hon, I know it's hard, but you can do this. You've already made it clear that being Somali is not about eating bananas with rice. That's a lie. You got this.
And it's kind of like the bananas and rice. You know, people don't really see, like, you know, it's you know, people don't think, oh, you can eat bananas with rice, but that's what it's like to be Somali and American. It's like that combination of banana and rice, but you're going to get what I mean.
You literally said it wasn't about bananas and rice. They are not sending their best. Now, staying in Minnesota, let's check in on the frightfully inept Governor Tim Walz. He is, with his scary wife, speaking from behind the gates of his mansion.
The resistance matters. We're not telling people to be silent, but we're not telling people to go out and cause problems. We're going to cause good trouble.
Cause trouble, all right, not good trouble, mind you. No good comes from coming to a violent uprising with a loaded gun and extra ammo and violently obstructing law enforcement officers. That's what happened in Minneapolis, and that's why a man is dead. But not if you listen to the Hollywood elite. They think they're living in Nazi Germany, and those enforcing the law are guilty of gross human rights violations. Here is the beautiful but bonkers Natalie Portman.
What's going on in our country right now is absolutely horrific with what the federal government, Trump's government, Kristi Noem, ICE, what they're doing is really the worst of humanity. And then we also have the best of humanity for the way people are showing up for each other in community and Americans coming out to support each other and protect each other and fight against injustice.
So pretty, but so stupid. Americans coming out to support each other? Really, Natalie? That's not what's happening. You've got the lunatic left coming out to obstruct law enforcement and to protect criminals from deportation. We're not talking about peaceful protest here. We're talking about obstructing law enforcement, attacking law enforcement. But again, the facts are lost on the Hollywood darlings. Here's Olivia Wilde, who is allegedly an actress. Here she emotes wildly.
The world is hurting right now, and this country is hurting, and it's appalling. I'm appalled. I'm sickened. And we can't go another day just sort of accepting this as our new norm. It's outrageous. People are being murdered. And I don't want to normalize seeing people being murdered on the internet, on film. It's hideous. And so if we can do anything out here to support the movement to cast ICE out, to delegitimize this unbelievably criminal organization, then that's what we should be doing. So I'm proud to wear the pin.
And here is Chris Cuomo, looking like he hasn't slept or showered for days. And according to the former CNN hack, it is the government that must back down. Let the violent agitators and insurrectionists have their day. Great idea, Chris.
The video accounts show a very troubling episode that beg for accountability and de-escalation. And it has to start with the government. Okay, we have to start at the top. These are the people who are charged with knowing how and insisting on de-escalation. The hot talk, the constant threats, the constant justification, it has to stop. We can't have government agents shooting and killing American citizens.
Let's bring in Newsweek's senior editor-at-large and Article 3 Project Senior Counsel Josh Hammer. Josh, Chris Cuomo argues that the de-escalation must start at the top, that law enforcement, government officials must back down. Do you agree?
Rita, last I checked, it wasn't the job of law enforcement to de-escalate or back down. Rather, last time I checked, and I'm pretty confident in this, in fact, as a lawyer myself, it's the job of law enforcement to, to enforce the law. It's literally in the name law enforcement. The day that federal law enforcement stops enforcing federal law ceases to be taken seriously. But, Rita, this is so evocative of some of the worst moments in American history. Look, I'm born on Abraham Lincoln's birthday. I think about the American Civil War a lot, probably more often, frankly, than I should. When we look at what some of today's leading provocateurs, these Minnesota anarchist insurrectionists who have been essentially trying to stir the passions of the anti-ICE demagoguery, there are people like Tim Walz and Keith Ellison and Jacob Fry. I was listening to Keith Ellison, the Attorney General of Minnesota. He was reading off his complaints from this lawsuit that the state of Minnesota has filed against DHS and ICE alongside the city of Minneapolis there. And he was saying how the 10th Amendment and states' rights, the federal government does not belong here. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, man, if you took this Muslim guy from Minnesota and you put on a thick Southern accent, the 10th Amendment, states' rights, the federal government does not belong here. I mean, it's like, my God, like we literally fought a civil war over this. I mean, this is literally just 1940s or 1840s, 1850s era antebellum Southern secessionary fervor. I mean, this is the ghost of John C. Calhoun, Jefferson Davis, Stonewall Jackson. They don't see it that way, but that's literally exactly what it is. So look, on the one hand, Minnesota looks like a failed state. And certainly, on the one hand, as an economic conservative, I don't necessarily want to waste resources trying to rehabilitate this clearly failed boondoggle state. On the other hand, the unmitigated supremacy of federal law, which, by the way, is a constitutionally required proposition under Article 6 of the Constitution. That's the supremacy clause. It's constitutionally required. And, oh, yeah, as I said, we literally fought a civil war. Over 600,000 Americans died. They paid the ultimate sacrifice to establish the timeless principle that federal law is supreme in this country. And now it's on the Trump administration to enforce that, to enforce the lessons of Abraham Lincoln, not to bow in the face of the dullard Chris Cuomo and various other nincompoops like that.
Josh, it is curious that ICE is operating across America, but it's just in a select few blue cities, often riddled with fraud and crime, where this sort of violence, this sort of uprising is occurring. Tell me about this latest case. We know about this man who was shot dead. He came to this protest with a loaded gun, and he had a fair amount of ammunition with him. He had a license to carry that gun. Who would come to a protest with a loaded gun, knowing you're going to have contact with law enforcement?
Yeah, just not a very smart thing to do. Okay, I think that's kind of the understatement of the century. I say that, by the way, as someone who is a concealed carry holder. I carry a firearm essentially every single day in my life. But if hypothetically, if I were so inclined to go here in the United States, here in Florida where I live, if I were hypothetically inclined to go to some protests, I probably would think twice about bringing lethal force, especially in a situation in a boiling pot like this. I mean, this is happening, 2 weeks after the death of Renee Good, after she was shouted at by her partner, "Drive, baby, drive!" Leading this ICE agent Jonathan Ross to fire shots. The guy who, by the way, was sent to the hospital. A lot of people forgot that detail. The agent in the Renee Good case went to the hospital actually because he had some internal bleeding and some hip damage there. He was subsequently released there. This is dangerous stuff. And you know exactly what you are doing if you are bringing lethal weaponry to a government protest, let alone a protest in a situation exactly like that. By all accounts, based on everything that I have read, the individual here, Alex Preddy, was told numerous times to stop what he was doing, to turn over his firearm, and to follow orders more generally, to follow the federal agent's orders there. He refused to do that. And tragically, that's why he's no longer with us.
Because we're not talking just about protests here, peaceful protests, robust protests. We're talking about active obstruction of law enforcement. We're talking about aggressive actions. It's a very different phenomenon to just showing up somewhere and protesting against what's happening because you don't agree with it. Now, you mentioned you've got a concealed carry license, and from what I understand, anyone who has one of those is told repeatedly through every step of the process, do not engage with police if you're carrying, not aggressively, not violently. You've just got to be hyper alert if you are carrying a loaded gun and you come in contact with police, because, of course, they are on high alert themselves.
Oh, yeah. And, it's not just police, but it's also just all federal agents, all federal property, more generally speaking here. Look, I mean, you go to any airport here, and pretty much any airport in the United States there's a large sign from TSA, which does the airport screenings, that says, make sure you're not carrying a weapon when you go through the metal detector there. This is a glaringly obvious sign in every airport. It's also federal courtrooms. Look, I mean, I'm a lawyer. I know a bunch of judges. So I think it was about a year and a half ago or so, I got lunch with a federal judge here in Miami with him and his law clerks there. And I left my firearm at home because I'm not going to bring a gun into a federal courthouse where there are U.S. Marshals. It's called common sense. I mean, we have a Second Amendment in this country, and thank God for that. I'm a huge proponent of the Second Amendment. We also have a thing between the ears here in the noggin called common sense. And it's incumbent upon all of us to not leave our common sense at home, no matter how much people like Tim Walz and Keith Ellis and Jacob Fry are trying to stir up the passions of the deeply impressionable.
I played a clip of Tim Walz earlier. His comments just so reckless. You could argue inciting violence. Here is another Democrat, Mark Kelly, saying that the agitator who was shot dead here was killed for no reason whatsoever.
Hey, everybody, it's Senator Mark Kelly. Hey, I watched that video of Minneapolis today. Probably watched it a dozen times. Pretty obvious that this man was shot dead in the street for no reason.
Where is the responsibility just to take a minute and let the process take place? Let's have an investigation to see precisely what happened. And I've seen that video multiple times myself, and how he could come to the conclusion that that man was shot for no reason whatsoever. It was just some sort of cold-blooded murder without provocation. It is incredible to me, Josh.
So it's incredible. And again, Rita, we just saw this. I mean, to me, this is the most remarkable part of all of this there, is that we just saw this play out like literally 2 weeks ago. So immediately when Renee Good was killed by Jonathan Ross, the ICE agent there, they said, oh my God, it's murder in cold blood. She's trying to swerve to get away from the video. But then, oh wait, we saw a second camera angle. We saw the cars actually going right at Jonathan Ross, the agent. Oh wait, then we find out that there was actually a hospital record of the agent being admitted to the hospital because he was hit and he had internal bleeding around his waist and hip area there. Then, oh wait, we saw the video of the partner saying, drive, baby, drive, instigating there. So these things do take time to actually learn all of the details of the situation there. And I think back to those first moments after the Renee Good shooting. You had Zohra Mamdani, AOC, and saying that she was murdered. Renee Good was murdered. That's what Mark Kelly's saying here, too, about Alex Pretty, that this is murder in cold blood on the streets of America there. Have you people not learned your lesson? What are you trying to do? I mean, ironically, these Democrats like Mark Kelly, they're claiming, they're purporting to care about American civilians there. Actually, do you know what the single best thing to protect the health, safety, security, prosperity, and flourishing of the American people? To have law enforcement do their job. It's not like they're going door to door trying to find the guy who's picking strawberries down at the local farm. They're going door to door trying above all to find people like sex offenders and child sex traffickers and gangbangers and murderers and rapists and transnational criminals. That's what they're trying to do. So if you want the American people to be safe, which if you take Mark Kelly at his word, and you probably shouldn't, but if you're taking him at his word, that's what he seems to want there, then you should support ICE to the T. Final note on this. I have to note that Mark Kelly is from a very interesting state when it comes to the whole immigration conversation. He's from Arizona, a state that alongside Texas is really kind of ground zero for America's ever-roiling immigration wars. Does Mark Kelly think that it is good politics there in the state of Arizona to be going this soft on immigration enforcement there? I think he's going to be in for a very, very rude awakening when it comes to his senatorial reelection if he keeps this up, frankly.
Now, we've heard plenty of reckless rhetoric from Democrats, some of them arguably inciting violence, but the influencers are also doing their bit. Josh, here is one encouraging his hundreds of thousands of followers to learn how to shoot guns.
You all need to be arming yourselves right now. You all need to learn how to shoot guns. You all need to learn how to protect yourselves. You guys need to learn what to do in a situation where you get detained and how to help your friends when they are getting detained. You all need to become aware of what's happening right now and how there is no protesting this without some sort of militant action.
There you go. There's no protesting this without some sort of militant action. The coverage of this story, I've got to tell you, globally is, as you would expect, is the regurgitation of the MSNBC, CNN line that this was just completely unjustified. These are peaceful protesters that are being shot in cold blood. But there you get an idea of the messaging that some of these activists are receiving. And sadly, some of them are listening, Josh, and turning up to a violent protest with a loaded gun.
These people like that so-called influencer. I've never heard of him, but apparently he's an influencer. They're trying to get people killed. Okay, that is literally what they are trying to do. They are trying to stir up the passions of people like Renee Good, of people like Alex Perry. They're trying to put them out there as cannon fodder. As cannon fodder for what? I mean, to accomplish what exactly there? Just to make people angrier and angrier against ICE? By the way, it's actually not even working. There was a poll from the New York Times Siena College, one of our most reputable pollsters here in the United States there, and they did a lot of questions, massive survey just last week. And one of the questions was approve, disapprove of Donald Trump's handling of immigration enforcement. 50 to 47 net approval. So despite all of this, despite all of the information operation from MS Now and CNN and all the usual suspects there, the American people still by and large support Donald Trump's immigration agenda. By the way, Hispanics were actually barely underwater by like 10 points or maybe even just under that in that New York Times Siena College poll there. So the notion that this is a huge political liability for the Trump administration, I think is just total gobbledygook with no semblance in reality there. So you're not really going to score political points. What are you trying to do? Like what is the goal here other than to get people killed on both sides of the standoff? Innocent people who are going to be riled up to try to do the quote unquote right thing there, or you're trying to get more ICE agents killed as well. And ultimately, Rita, that really is where I come down. To me, it is there in the radical left. To be a left that's going back to the French Revolution means that you believe to some extent in violence. We saw that with the murder of my friend Charlie Kirk. We've seen it with the multiple attempts of assassination on Donald Trump's life. We saw it with the assassination of the United Healthcare CEO from this socialized medicine fanatic. We see it over and over and over again there. They are willing, able, and at times eager to resort to violence. And it's horrific, horrific stuff there. And frankly, that above all is what we're seeing playing out here, along with this neo-Confederate insurrection behavior that ultimately must be stomped and crushed by the sheer might and force of federal law enforcement.
Now, we've had a bunch of actors, Insta influencers, activists emoting wildly about what's happening in Minneapolis, but we cannot forget Steve Kerr, the Golden State Warriors head coach, has spoken of his love for Minnesota, and he's decried the misinformation in the media about what's happening in the state of Minnesota. I think I agree with him about that, Josh, probably not for the same reasons, but there has been so much misinformation. You talked about what happened 2 weeks ago with Renee Good, what's happening right now with this latest shooting. But the amount of misinformation we saw in the past week about a 5-year-old that was supposedly snatched by ICE was astonishing, even by the standards we've come to sadly accept, Josh. Tell us what really happened in this case.
So first of all, Steve Kerr is something of a sad case. I mean, I remember watching this guy back in the 1990s, back when he was a sharpshooter for the Chicago Bulls. I mean, Steve Kerr was Michael Jordan's teammate on many of those Chicago Bulls teams there. He had a beautiful jump shot. This guy is a totally bonkers, out to left field leftist. It was either his father or someone very close to him, Rita, who was killed in a Hezbollah terrorist attack in Lebanon in the early 1980s. And to this day, Steve Kerr is one of the biggest cheerleaders of the anti-Israel Palestinian Arab cause there, which is just, it makes your mind just want to explode there. So here he is yet again there. And frankly, I think back to that line from Laura Ingraham so many years ago talking about LeBron James, which is just shut up and dribble. Or in this case of Steve Kerr, shut up and coach. He's actually a very good coach, by the way. If he stuck to that, maybe he would have, frankly, a lot more success there in our conversations like this. Look, this misinformation about this 5-year-old boy there, that's not what happened. They were not going after the 5-year-old boy. They were going after the actual father there. The 5-year-old boy was essentially there right in the way there. But that's what they do. They take the tiniest morsel of connection to the story and they run with it in an entirely different direction because, again, the ultimate goal here is not to deliver the truth. It is to stir the passions as demagogues have been doing for thousands of years there. It turns out that today, one of the biggest places where these passions are unleashed is on federal law enforcement. So Rita, like many Americans, I really do pray for the health and safety and efficacy of this nation's federal law enforcement apparatus because they are under siege right now. They're absolutely under siege there. They need our support. They need our prayers. And ultimately, they need the courage to do their job because the rule of law depends on, without the rule of law, there is no society, there is no freedom, there is no liberty, there's nothing.
Joel Shammer, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you.